Hello and welcome back to our discussion on understanding the impact of financing decisions on the financial statements, and in the process also to understand the effect on the profit after tax and earning per share. We already in the previous discussion we saw how the acquisition of asset through loan or through capital will affect the earning per share and EPS. We saw that the profit generating ability remaining same, the profit distributing ability is changing because of the financing decision. Now we'll take up the same question, but try to understand the effect of acquiring the asset through lease, and there's an option there. The lease can be treated as operating lease or the finance lease. So without getting into the differences, distinction between OL and FL, I'll try to put it in a simple form now, that operating lease is treated as an expense. In a finance lease, the asset has to be shown with the corresponding sources on the balance sheet. So if we treat the lease as an operating lease, then the entire lease rent is treated as an expense. So no other change except that the lease rent is shown as an expense and lease rent is shown as a cash outflow. No depreciation, no interest, no asset appearing on the balance sheet. In that case, the earning per share is 1.12 and the PAT is 11,200. So if the asset is seen as a operating lease, then the lease rent will appear as an expense. But if the asset will be acquired through a finance lease, then it is necessary to show the asset on the balance sheet, and the value of the asset will be determined, the discounted value of the lease rent payable, and to discount that we'll use the existing rate of interest as a discount rate, and by discounting that we got the value of the asset as 20,604. And if we take that as a finance lease, so the asset will appear on the balance sheet first on the date of acquisition at 20,604, and the corresponding source as the liability on the balance sheet on the sources side. And during the year, because there is a plant and a corresponding source, we have to show the interest and depreciation, and interest and depreciation is calculated by preparing the loan statement. Interest is calculated as a 10% on the lease payable, and the balancing figure is treated as the principal. With respect to the depreciation can be SLM or can be RBM or can be principal component of the lease as treated as depreciation. Suppose let us start with an assumption that we are going to treat principal component as depreciation, then interest will be shown as 2060 and depreciation will be 4,439, and to the extent of depreciation the value of the plant will reduce, and to the extent of the principal the value of the lease payable will reduce, but the amount shown in the income statement is exactly equal to the lease rent. Therefore, if the lease is treated as a finance lease and the depreciation is a lease component or principal component of the lease rent, then the PAT is exactly same as the PAT that we got under operating lease. But the PAT will change if we take the depreciation to be either SLM or RBM. Let us take the depreciation to be SLM, straight line method. Since we are given 4 years, so the depreciation is 5,151. So in that case, the depreciation will be in the income statement will be shown as 5,051, and asset will reduce to the extent of that depreciation, whereas the loan will reduce to the extent of the principal component. So the difference of higher depreciation from 4439 to 5151 will have an effect on the profit available for distribution, and so you can see that the PAT is no more 11,200 but 10,702. This change is because of the change in the method of depreciation on the leased asset. And if we shift that method to change the method to RBM, then higher depreciation, further increase in depreciation, so there will be further fall in the PAT. And if it is RBM, assuming that the rate of depreciation will be 2 times of the rate of depreciation SNM, the amount of depreciation will be much higher. So the depreciation in the income statement will be 12,879. The value of the plant will reduce to the extent of 12,000, and there is a drastic fall in the PAT because of high depreciation. To summarize here, we can see that if there is a change in financing through loan or the equity, we have seen that PAT and EPS change. But even within the lease, the PAT and EPS will change if the methods of depreciation charge is different. There is only one case where the profit under operating lease will be same as the profit under the finance lease, and that happens when the depreciation is exactly equal to the principal component of the lease rent. So in the last 2 sessions, therefore, we try to understand the impact of the financing decisions on the financial statements, and in the process we also extended and wanted to understand the effect of the financing decision on the profit generating and profit distributing. The profit distributing ability of the firm is definitely dependent on the financing structure. So a firm can change the profit distributing ability, that is PAT, EPS, return on equity, by changing the capital structure or changing the financing decision. So one has to understand the financing decision by examining the effect on the financial statement and examine the effect on some important indicators like PAT and EPS. Thank you very much.